This is the LK Chen Striking Eagle Jian. It is a one-to-one recreation of a very significant sword in Chinese history, one that dates back over 2,000 years and was found only recently in the hidden tomb of Zhao Mo, the king of Nan Yue. At nearly 5 feet long, this sword pushes the limits of swordsmithing just as much today as it did over 2 millennia ago. And this sword serves more than just a ceremonial boast or a mausoleum decoration. This sword functions as a very powerful cutter, and it really lives up to its name, as it can fly and strike as fierce as an eagle. Back in 1983, work at a construction site in Guangzhou came to an abrupt halt, as workers found evidence of a buried tomb. They followed protocol and contacted the regional archaeologists to come and investigate the area. At first glance, they reckoned it was a Ming Dynasty tomb, as those were actually quite commonly found. However, as they breached the tomb, they realized that they had unearthed something much more significant. Not only was the tomb completely untouched, but it contained artifacts from over 2,000 years ago. Inside the tomb were treasures and riches, cookware, instruments, weapons and armor, gold and jade, all fit for royalty. And in the main chamber was a burial suit of plated jade, the same type of burial suit that is reserved only for emperors, except it was sewn together with silk instead of gold thread, which by no means makes it any less expensive. If there was still any mystery as to the identity of the king buried in this tomb, archaeologists found the imperial seal of the king Zhao Mo, the grandson of the founder of the kingdom of Nan Yue, Zhao Tu. And that's where this sword comes in. The striking eagle is based on the longest of the 10 swords found in that tomb. Now, each sword had something unique about it, whether it was some extravagant sword fittings like jade for the guard or the pommel or decorations, or others that just push the limits of forging capabilities, like this sword here. I cannot stress enough that even how ridiculously long this sword is, it's still made for practical usage, proving the advanced technology and forging skills that were in practice at this time. Long two-handed jian like this were actually quite common in military combat. They were wielded by highly skilled, heavily armored warriors in the Warring States period. Their armor was made of a thick rhinoceros hide, which allowed them to free up their shield hand and use a two-handed longsword just like this. Although there are no records that talk about how Chang Jian or really any other weapon were used during that time, we do know that this was used on the battlefield, as it is written in some accounts. And there was even one passage that likens this sword to being used like a long spear. Although a long piercing blade with a long handle and long reach could favor the thrusting and piercing techniques of a spear, my only objection to that being its sole usage would be the expense of time and money to make something like this. If you want a spear, just get a spear. They're much cheaper. This has to offer something more. Now, I believe that this sword was just as much cut as it was thrust, and we can really see that when we take a look at the blade itself. Even at 42 inches of blade, this sword is unbelievably light. The cross-section is a common 8-sided profile of the Warring States era in early Han, which actually is a little bit heftier than the diamond-shaped blades we see later on. However, the key to this sword's agility really comes down to 2 things in particular. First off is the distal taper that we have, and we actually have that on 2 planes. So it is much wider closer to the guard than it is, especially as we get closer to the tip. And then of course the tip is very aggressive here. However, we also have good distal taper going from the guard in the thickness of the blade all the way down to the tip. Now of course that's one part of it, and the other is a good blend of steel because you need to have a nice firm steel that's going to hold a sword this long, as well as an edge, and something flexible that's not going to break upon impact or dull too easy. Finding the right steel blend, advanced hardening practices, and proper edge grinds really allow this sword to function reliably on the battlefield. These are elements that are hard to get even in modern times. So this sword really represents the pinnacle of swordsmithing and forging practices from that time. It's difficult to know the exact composition of the original blade. However, we do know what makes up this modern Jian by LK Chen. This sword is a 1060 carbon steel with a T9 tungsten vanadium high-speed tool steel blend, which means it's flexible, it's durable, and it's reliable. And it also makes for a beautiful pattern weld. The shape of the handle reveals a lot about how this sword would have been used. And here we have a diamond-shaped cross-section, which lends to more blade edge indexing and alignment, so you can have a proper line for your cut and get your hand behind it, rather than a cylindrical shape, which would favor more spearing techniques. The handle is wrapped with a waxed cotton cord with some risers for additional grip. Personally, I prefer this type of wrapping as it allows me to feel the original contours of the wooden scales underneath. And the risers are really well placed, so it adds to the gripping ability without getting distracting or in the way. The guard has the shape of the sharp eagle's beak, and the scabbard is crafted to match the curvature for some really nice fit and finish. Overall, the sword and scabbard have a minimalistic design, which is quite sleek, especially when you notice the subtle lines and curves in the scabbard, as well as the color themes of the black and brass and white. It really stands out. The pommel is simply a brass cap that offers no counterweight to the blade, so a long tang is quite useful in this case to add some liveliness to the sword. The point of balance rests a good 5 inches above the guard, which lends to a good forward pull when cutting. Speaking of cutting, I found this sword to be quite a formidable cutter, especially with such a long blade and handle, which could easily cause rolling and scooping. The flexibility is quite forgiving of unaligned strikes, and I didn't feel much of any feedback, if at all. The blade snapped through the targets with ease. Of course, I tested this with soft targets like water bottles, not hard targets like tatami mats with inserts or bamboo, but LK Chen himself has videos of him demonstrating this sword cutting through thick bamboo stalks, which proves that this sword is an effective cutter with both soft and hard targets. In martial arts practice, this sword is very lively and quick. It has reach and leverage and can swiftly cut and thrust, even with single hand techniques. I find it to have very accurate tip control and reactive snapping and tapping. The only thing that I'd have to warn you on is that the sword is incredibly long, so you're going to have to make adjustments, especially when you're passing the tip low past the ground so you don't end up scraping or dragging. I am 6 feet tall, so I haven't had any trouble drawing the sword, resheathing the sword, or even using the sword. But this could potentially be an issue for you if you don't have as much reach. This historically was an issue for King Zheng, who actually later became China's first emperor, Shuang, as he had a long sword and during an attempted assassination was unable to take the sword out of the scabbard. Luckily, he was able to evade the assassin until he was able to produce the sword and fatally wound the man who was later finished off by the king's guards. When we take a look back at Nan Yue, we can see that King Zhao Mo, similar to King Zheng, had his own longsword as a symbol of power. And although we cannot be certain that he was skilled with the sword itself was functionally ready and poised to handle itself in combat if needed. So whether you want to wield a symbol of strength and power from the past, or add reach and leverage dynamics to your cutting, or simply use a historically accurate Shuang from over 2 millennia ago, the Striking Eagle delivers. Now I'll leave all the relevant information down in the description below, as well as a link to the site where you can order this from LK Chen yourself. And as always, I'd love to hear your feedback about this weapon. If you have this sword, what are your favorite things about it? What are things that stand out to you? And if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think and have questions about. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next.